Hi guys, back again. So this is suicide part 2. There was a few things that I didn't talk about in our last talk on suicide, and one of them was, just to clarify, which I didn't say in the first one, and I don't know why. Actually, the first job I ever got in Australia was to actually go and work at Lifeline, and I worked there for a couple of years as a supervisor, but also I worked there as a online counsellor as well. So that gave me an interesting perspective on both sides. So in the UK we had that everyone has the right. In Australia, no, that's not quite the case. They did a different way of doing things, which I think made it a lot harder. And so I didn't actually say that in the first one, so apologies for that. The second thing I wanted to clarify is when I said about how I felt about, does everyone have the right to kill themselves, take their own life? And part of me does believe that this is our body and we have the right, and we have to take responsibility, and if we choose to do that. But then I said, if people aren't in their right minds, and I think I just wanted to clarify what I meant by that. What I meant by that is people that are under the influence of drugs and alcohol. I did not mean people who are depressed or anxious or have a kind of mental health issue. And so I don't believe people who are in those places struggling with those things are not in their right mind. I do think people who are under the influence of drugs and alcohol are not in the right space to make probably good choices for their life sometimes. So in that sense, obviously if someone is under the influence of alcohol, then I do feel that it would be my job to ring and get the police to come around and do a welfare check, because obviously they're less impulse control and also more likely to be reckless. So in that's what I meant by that, just to clarify that, because when I watched it back I realised I hadn't really said that. There's a couple more things I wanted to talk about in regards to suicide, and I think I really wanted to help other therapists, because I think there's a few therapists that watch this, and I really am aware that a lot of us don't actually get any kind of training on how to deal with clients who are suicidal. We get encouraged to ask them, but then what do we do? And so I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit, because I think that's a tricky one. I think as I've worked in sort of that area where you had to one of the things in both UK and in Australia, you had to ask whether that person was having thoughts of suicide. It didn't matter what they rung up about. They might have rung up to say they couldn't get bread at the baker's, but you still had to ask them. And that was quite awkward sometimes, because if you weren't in that kind of stream of talking, it seemed a bit out of centre. But I realised the relevance of that is because people often present with actually quite different issues to what they're really struggling with. And if the person on the other end of the phone, couldn't find the courage to bring up, are you having thoughts of suicide? And it always surprised me, because we could be having this fairly innocuous conversation about something, and I would ask them and they would say yes, they were. And so obviously that opened up the conversation to actually talk about what they really wanted to talk about. And so I probably got into the habit of asking people, so it kind of got rid of that fear around what that would mean, because we did obviously you have to ask the question and then you kind of do risk assessment. So are they at high risk of actually fulfilling that plan, that thought that they're having? So you do that within the context of the relationship. You just don't go, well, you kind of gently bring that in. Imagine it's tough when you think that way. Have you thought about how you might take your life, or is it something you're just and so you gently sort of ask some questions for your sake, not really for theirs in a way, because this is the kind of thing that once they leave the room, this is the kind of thing as a therapist you go home and worry about, and keeps you up at night. What should I have done? Did I do the right thing? What should I have done? And so it's really important that you have you practice this with clients. So even if they come in with something, has this led to thoughts of suicide? And then you obviously, if they say yes, then you gently ask throughout the conversation. You just don't go into risk assessment and then safety planning. That's gonna actually stop the relationship. It's all about the the relationship, that feeling of safety, that you're not going to, a lot of people will come in and say, oh, they're terrified of saying they are suicidal because they think I'm going to call the police or the ambulance and get them carted off. And actually in some instances, people have said they've had thoughts of suicide and the person's just freaked out, even professionals who perhaps should know better, and gone, okay, we'll better get you into hospital, because they don't want the responsibility of this person dying on their watch. And a lot of it is about self-preservation, I think, when people react so quite intensely. And, you know, and I'm surprised, you know, that happens probably more than it should. So these are professionals, and so they know, people know, oh, I can't bring that up, I can't talk about that. Excuse me. So it is a bit tricky as a therapist to know how to broach it. But for me, if someone's in a lot of pain, unbearable pain sometimes, I think it just, you know, makes sense to ask, because a lot of people won't just bring it up. They will not tell you unless they've been asked. So I think finding the courage to ask and then knowing how to deal with it afterwards. So you gently ask them, have they got a plan? You know, and this is throughout the conversation, not all in one moment. So have they got a plan? You know, have they thought about how they would take their own life? You know, and you gently ask those kind of risk assessment questions. And you ascertain through your intuition, through what you're saying, whether this person is just having thoughts because they're in a lot of pain. They don't actually want to die. They just want to see a way through the pain. Or they actually really quite intent on taking their own life. And of course, if you thought, you know, if they have a plan, if they thought about when they're going to do it, you know, like, wow, it sounds like you've really thought this through. You know, have you got time frame for this? And so asking them those difficult conversations, because it is difficult. It's not easy to broach this subject. And we find it hard to understand. And so, you know, a lot of this is about our fears as therapists as to how far to go with this. Ignorance is bliss. Sometimes we'd rather not know. And so we don't ask. So, excuse me, I'm just going to get a tissue. So you've asked them, they've said yes, and throughout the conversation, as you're finding out their story and what's been going on and how they're feeling, you gently are, you know, like you know, you said earlier, you had thoughts of, so I'm just wondering, you know, had you got a plan? You know, have you got the means? If they say they're going to shoot themselves, are they, you know, there's someone that's got, have you got a gun? You know, so anyway, so you start to sort of gently sort of ask as throughout the conversation. You don't get stuck in that, oh my God, they're going to die, they're going to kill themselves and I'm responsible. The only thing you are responsible, if they have said to you, I'm going to go kill myself, or I'm going to go kill somebody else, and I have got the means to do it, and I'm going to do it when I leave here, then really that obviously then you have to do something. You say, you actually get very honest and you say, well, you know, I'm mandated to report if you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else. And so that leaves me in a difficult situation because I'm going to have to talk to the police. And I think it's about, you know, see, I think therapy as one of the bravest professions there is. You have to be very courageous because you have to talk about and confront people with things that are going to make you and them feel uncomfortable. And so you have to practice that and get better at that. Because I'm telling you now, if you don't step up and step into that, you are going to be, this is the clients that keep you up at night and go, oh, I shoulda, woulda, coulda, you know, and what stopped me. And this is what a good supervisor will encourage you to do. Step out into that fear and be courageous about what what you might need to do and how you might need to challenge them. Now, a lot of people go, yeah, I could probably do it any time, you know, and really, what can you do with that? Nothing. If they go, oh yeah, well, I'll probably do it next week, you know, the police aren't going to want to hear that. They, you know, when you phone the police and go, oh look, I've got a client who's thinking about killing themselves, and they said they might do it next week, they'll go, okay, we'll call this next week. You can't stop people from doing those kind of things to themselves, and it's not your job to. It's not your job to stop them. If they've said they're going to do it then and there, if said they're going to go and hurt someone then and there, then that's different. You are mandated to report if you think someone is at risk themselves or another. And I think having clear boundaries about what is your responsibility and what isn't helps you feel more confident. And that's why I said to you in the last video that if someone is highly suicidal, I will actually make them commit to staying safe until after we've finished working together, and knowing in my heart that hopefully if they do some work, they're not going to be in that place where they want to take their own life. And so I, obviously it helps me feel safe in the relationship. I'm not on edge worrying it's not my job, it's not my responsibility. And I think a lot of therapists care a lot, but you can't care more about them than they care about them. And that's the trouble with highly empathic therapists who care a lot. Some of us care too much, and that is about you're in that stepping into a space, and I don't think that's helpful. I think it's boundary busting. I think it's disrespecting of them when you think you can take care of them or save them from themselves, and it just doesn't work. So it's about realizing what you can and can't do and having the wisdom to know the difference, what you can and can't control. And so from a therapist perspective, it's about being courageous enough to ask the questions and know that it's going to lead to uncomfortability. If someone said they're suicidal, you often get triggered by fear, but that's your fear, your feeling, your responsibility. But if you project that out and go, oh well, I can't let you leave until you've committed to me that you're not going to do it. And I've actually worked with a couple of clients that that they had it in their mindset, and they said, nothing you can do to stop me. And we had really good relationships, so we had good chats about what it would mean and what it would mean to me if they took their own life. And I didn't want to guilt trip them. That's not what I was trying to do. I was just trying to help them see all the aspects, all the ramifications, all the perspectives. And we just had great conversations about what it means to live on the planet. And we live in a toxic society. We have all been traumatized, and how any of us are sane, sometimes I wonder, because we live in an insane world. I really believe that. I mean, it's just kind of things are getting worse, things are building up, and really this is about helping people that want the help. You can't force anyone to want to live. So it is a tough situation for us as therapists, and for also the people, obviously, that are going through all this, to actually get to a point where you just feel like you'd be better off not living or dead. Yeah, it's confronting, isn't it? It's confronting to us as therapists. It takes courage, and it takes patience and compassion for self. It's not easy to do this job, and anyone that thinks it's an easy job is probably not doing it right. This is a really difficult job, and you have to look after you, and you have to do what's right for you as a therapist. And obviously we can help people and support them and influence them to a degree. The nice thing about therapy is people sometimes have to get to a really dark place before they actually go and see a therapist. And sometimes they're in a really good place where, just tell me what to do, help me. So they're very open to it. They're very wanting things to be different. And if we can give them hope, and when I ask people at the end of the session, I say, what will you take away from today? A lot of the time they'll say hope. And for me, that's it. I've done a good job there, because I've given them a little bit of hope that things can and will be different. And they can and they will be different, but they are going to have to do some work. And I don't make any bones about that. I'm very upfront. I say it as it is, and I go, what are you willing to do? Because it does take an element of commitment and willingness and courage to walk through into those spaces that they're going to have to walk through. And so I love being a therapist, because I know that if someone walks into my room or contacts me, perhaps they've heard of other people where I've helped, and that's fantastic. And they can have some confidence that maybe this person is okay and knows what they're doing and can help. But you can only do what you can do, and you have to recognize that, and that's not always comfortable for us as therapists. So I did want to touch on that. I kind of, because this is for everyone. It's not just for people who are struggling, it's also for people that are helping people that are struggling. I think we need support. I think when I did my studies, I studied for 6 years. I did a master's, and they didn't talk about suicide not once, and it was only because of me working at Lifeline that I got that really good training about what to do if someone is feeling suicidal. And so I think there is a bit of a gap, and that hopefully, I studied a few years ago now, so hopefully that's changed, and they are sort of talking about that, because there seems to be a huge shift. I have a friend who works in a high school, or she did, she doesn't anymore, and it seemed like suicide was something young people just bandied around. They would say to other kids, oh, just go kill yourself, and kids would say, I just want to die, I want to kill myself. So it was the kind of terminology has become much more apparent in these younger generations, where they just, we had, when we did online, our demographic was young, like really young. Those young people that were more adept at online stuff and wouldn't pick up the phone. That's kind of something we used to do back in the day when we just had phones, whereas now it's all online. So that's why they brought in this new way of contacting Lifeline through online. And our demographic was young. They talked about suicide a lot. They seemed to have it as, it was almost like a trend. And I talked to young people who had been told, oh yeah, go kill yourself by other kids. It seems to be something that's really, going around. It's like a trend. And so suicide for the younger generations is something they talk about much more openly. And of course, maybe us older generations, it was always a bit taboo. It wasn't that long ago we were putting people in prison for trying to kill themselves. It's barbaric, I know, but and so it brought a lot of shame, not only to their families, because it's like, oh my goodness, they killed themselves, and there's still a lot of shame around that. And I get it. You feel like, wow, especially as a parent, if you've got a young person, what did I do wrong? We tend to blame ourselves. I must have been a terrible parent. We're pretty hard on ourselves sometimes. So having been able to talk about this, because I do feel it's something that's becoming more and more apparent. More and more people are taking their own lives, and we need to be able to have a conversation about that without getting triggered, without letting the trigger of fear dictate what then we do, which is we want to shut it down. No, don't talk about it. No, don't think that. No. And I don't think that works, because it's like if someone's thinking about it, and of course they realize that if they tell someone about it, they are going to trigger that person. So they're very aware. People are very aware of the impact them wanting to kill themselves will have on another. And as a professional, then that's kind of part of the job, that we get to listen to the stuff that, we probably don't want to listen to either, but that's the job. Our job is to sit with people while they're going through these very distressing times in their life. And this is why I say, if you're a therapist, and you are a courageous person, because sitting with your own stuff isn't great, and then you sit with another, and when you're a caring person, it's difficult. And so I just want to encourage all the therapists that might be listening to be kind, compassionate to yourself, but be courageous. Step into the uncomfortability and realize you're not responsible for keeping them alive. Know what you are and you're not responsible for and to. And when you feel confident that and I know when I had a client in and I think they may be, I would say to them, can you commit to staying safe until we meet again? And sometimes they would say yes. Sometimes they would say yes, and sometimes they'd say no. And and they'd tell me short blank, well, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to do it. You know, they knew that they wouldn't be able to do that. That wouldn't be fair on me for a start, because what am I going to do? And so as a therapist, what do? And this is what I would do. I would hold that person in my mind's eye, not as sad, lonely, about to take their own life. I would see them as whole, healthy, and well. I would see them thriving. I would see them, hitting goals, accomplishing their desires. I would see them whole, healthy, and well. And that is the imagination that I think the most powerful tool we all have, is to hold people in my mind's eye in that way. And that's how I see all clients. I don't see them as, pathetic, miserable, sad, hopeless. I never see anyone like that. I like to call it faith over fear. Both fear and faith both require you to believe something you don't know or you can't foretell. And one is fear, they're going to die, they're going to kill themselves, the what ifs. And one is faith, believing that they're going to be okay, that they're whole. They will be, not today, but whole, healthy, well. Self-fulfilling prophecy. What's the alternative? I suppose something to think about. And I'm glad you're listening and you stayed to the end if you did. Go gentle, go easy, be patient, be compassionate to yourself, whoever you are and whatever you're struggling with, whether you're a therapist or not, doesn't really matter. See yourself whole, healthy and well. Have the faith to believe, because if you had a choice, why wouldn't you choose faith over fear? Yeah. Thank you for listening. Take care. See you soon. Bye.